Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome back to the eastern wing of the Stink Bug Works. Well, I had no idea that this little thing would have stirred as much interest as it did. But a couple of my viewers, and both of them seem to be very observant people. You know, some people watch videos and they really don't see it. These two guys, among many of you, look at a video and they see what I'm talking about. You know, they get it. So the first one was Scaleworks. Now, he's over in Europe. And in Europe, they try to keep things small and cheap, but they always wind up being big and expensive. Well, the whole idea of this was around some challenge, and I don't recall the rules, but your project had to be made mostly of foam. So I started with a foam design done by Jay Turner back in the 1980s. And he was using car motors and round cells. And it worked perfectly good for that. But me being me, I like to shrink things down and see what they do. And I shrunk it down, and what I discovered right off the bat is the big slab sides on Jay Turner's design did not work well with the smaller stuff I was doing. In fact, it'd go real fast downwind and just barely move coming upwind. So I started reducing the overall height and reducing the height and reducing the height. And pretty soon I got down to this little pancake. And the whole idea of the pancake was that air resistance wasn't going to stand by. Air resistance was not going to be as big of a problem. So that was the first design impetus behind this. The second one was to find a motor and actually to find a drivetrain, because here, let's get into it. It's a really small motor, as motors go, and it's a really small drivetrain turning a really small prop. So I looked at various iterations, and this is what I finally came up with. And these are some ideas taken from the little enclosed drives from H&M, and you used to get them from MHZ as well. Anyway, I did some fooling around and I discovered that just a piece of silicone tube was good enough to connect this to that. Now, the problem was this used a 2mm shaft, so I made an adapter with just a wheel collar and a piece of K&S tubing sticking out. So it was 3mm tubing. So this would go into it at this end, and it had 3mm on that end. The motor has a 3mm shaft, so it's just slide a piece of tubing over there. If the motor has a 1/8 inch shaft, it'll still work. So that sort of established the drive. The motor was a whole nother problem. And these little helicopter motors, these little drone motors, drone guys like to have lower KVs. And for a boat, you know, I need 3,500 RPM per volt, 3,000 RPM per volt. Well, this is 2,300, and that's the highest I could find in that. And it seems to work pretty good. The motor doesn't Doesn't get hot at all. I could run this thing all day long. And on a 500 milliamp pack, it will run all day long. This, like I said, is a 18 amp speed control. I think I can get by with a 5 amp speed control. Standard micro servo, you could put an even smaller one in today. I used that because I had it. And then just my receiver without a case. And the ubiquitous cheap hardware. Fabricate your own turn fin. Fabricate your own way to hold the drive shaft there. And you have it. Now, here's the deal. In order to make these, with a nice cut in here, you have to have some way of doing it. Well, here's what I did. I made me some templates, and they have little spikes on them. And I stick them on a piece of foam, and I go up against a router blade on my table router so I can make one of these, which happens to be this part. See, you can still see the holes where this, plugged into it. And, of course, the same thing for the upper half of the body and the lower half of the step. And then once this lower half of the step was cut, and this is now a piece of foam, I'd put that piece of foam in here, put some weights on it, and drag a hot wire across these phenolic templates, and boom, cut the right angle of dangle. We all like the angle of dangle, right? So you cut the right angle of dangle into your, what shall we call this? The sponson? You cut your angle of dangle into the sponson, and there you go. You have 3 pieces that will glue together and make this boat. I just took 2 pieces of wood, glued them together at a right angle, put sandpaper on them, and that's how I sand the edges when you glue these things together to get everything nice and square. I have this box marked Jet Stepper drive parts. In here, you'll look and you'll say, oh, holy mackerel there, Andy. He's got 2mm stainless steel precision drive shafts. He has precision Teflon bearings. He has precision aluminum stuffing tubes. And he has, let me get a load of this. He has motor couplers. It's just a wheel collar and a piece of brass tubing and a piece of silicone tubing. It's all that motor needs. He also has, ladies and gentlemen, may I have a drum roll, a whole bunch of Graupner 26mm M2 props. And to top it all off, now, the motor that's in my Jet Stepper is no longer available. It cannot be found. They don't make it anymore, but they make the V2 motor. This was the 2822 2300 in here. I wonder if you can read that on here. Will the camera focus in on that? Is that legible? I don't know. But the new motors, there's a problem with them. Not an insurmountable problem, but a problem. This is the new motor. And the problem is, it has these little tabs sticking out here. Now, in reality, you could probably leave them on In all honesty, I'd take a pair of dikes and just snip, 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 and they're gone. And bingo, you have the new. You know, it's the same motor in a different case. This one's black, this one's all blinged out red. But it's the same windings on the same stator and the same magnets, and it's got more bling now. So now you can have blingy motors that you probably have to cut the tabs off of, but so be it. So I have in my possession many motors, many drive shafts, many props, many couplers, and the ability to make many hauls. I also have, I'd love to just throw this over my shoulder for effect. That would, my DUP would be fug plastic. And for the special custom one, hello. Here we are on camera doing something we've never done before, and we're wasting everybody's time. There you go. For the custom one, an extra thin, love the sound of that stuff. Sounds like metal. An extra thin sheet of carbon fiber. I do have plenty of styrene plastic. And lastly, I also have, once you attach the hull top and the sponson that's cut at the appropriate angle, you'll have this shape. And your top half of foam is just going to be a big square block, and it's going to be big and square everywhere. I can put it in here, and these don't have to be glued together. I can just set your ordinary thing here, line them up just right, put a couple of weights on them, and drag a hot wire across there. And you get this nice, gentle curve from here to here, upon which you can sand and sand and sand and shape and sand. See, I sanded down here and left a little bit for the rudder, and I sanded down here and I rounded this off and kind of made it disappear into nothing here in this corner. You know, and I did the same thing all along here. I sort of vanished it down to nothing, and this whole side was all non-trip. It even has like a 57 T-bird fin. So that's that. Then, and this stuff is hard to find, the real stuff. Silkspan. You cover this thing in Silkspan and water-based primer, or sanding sealer. Water-based sanding sealer. Readily available at Home Depot. And it penetrates right through the Silkspan and into the pores, the individual little pores in your foam, and it's there forever. I mean, this stuff is stuck down. It's not coming up. It's part of the foam. You see, I waterproofed it here on the inside just to do the same thing, and I used some Silkspan just to fill up the porous part of the foam and give it some strength, because it's pretty thin right here. That's one thing. When I cut them down like that, you are going to have to make a bubble for the motor. You can make the top fatter. I kind of liked it sleek with a little bubble. Because remember, wind. We are fighting wind. Wind really affects these things. They weigh virtually nothing. I mean, I don't even know what this one weighs, but we're all going to find out here in just one moment. Since I do happen to have a scale right here and a coffee cup that's in the way. Don't spill it. Let's find out what this thing weighs. Grams. This thing, without a battery, but everything else it needs to run, weighs 180 grams. 180 grams. That's 0.6 pounds. 180 grams. Just slightly over half a pound. There you go. That's it. Ready to go with everything except a battery. Well, I pretty much, I haven't covered the point of this discussion, the entire point of this discussion. I know that Kobe up at JR Marine is in the business of selling hydroplane hulls. Kobe, if you want to talk about selling some of these, give me a shout and I can make a run of them. Here's the problem. It takes just as long to make one as it does to make 10. And the reason is most of your time is in setting up the tooling. The actual tooling action that you do on the part only takes a fraction of the time. The big thing is getting whatever machine it is, the bandsaw or the table router, getting those out, getting them set up, getting the right tooling in them, yada, 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 yada. It's easier to cut 10 of them than it is to cut one. Well, not easier. It's just as easy. So if there's enough interest in these things, they're a hoot. You can race them in a swimming pool and actually be competitive. They'll turn on a dime. They're just a hoot, and they weigh nothing. They'll fit in a paper bag. So give me a shout if you want to, make a bunch of these things. And we'll see what happens. Until then, jet out.